was fired from the Army Map Service because he was gay, most of us here were very young, or maybe not even born. But that event would have an enormous impact on our lives, because Frank went on to become one of the pioneers of our movement. I told Frank that someone needs to write his biography because of the extraordinary contributions he has made to this movement, and because I can't talk about everything he has done during his activist career tonight, and neither can he. And for those of you who know Frank, you understand. But some highlights. Frank was a founder of the Mattachine Society of Washington in 1961, which was the beginning of our movement locally. In 1963, Frank made the outrageous suggestion to a horrified House Appropriations Commission that the DC sodomy law should be repealed. In 1963, the Mattachine Society, at Frank's urging, came out with a position that given the lack of valid scientific evidence, homosexuality must be considered as an orientation the same as heterosexuality. This was in 1963. In 1968, Frank coined the phrase, "gay is good," modeling it on "black is beautiful," showing the connections between our movements. Frank understood that gay people had to overcome the characterization of homosexuality as criminal, mentally disturbed, and sick in order to win a place for us in this society. In 1971, Frank ran for Congress here as an openly gay man. In April of 1971, Frank was one of the founders of the Gay and Lesbian Activists Alliance, which grew out of the nucleus of his campaign. In 1973, Frank, along with Gene O'Leary, Bruce Voller, Barbara Giddings, and others, founded the National Gay Task Force, the earlier name for NGLTF. Frank was also intimately involved in the fight to have the American Psychiatric Association reverse its position that homosexuality was an illness. In December of 1973, the APA Board of Trustees did just that, with Frank at the meeting. And as Frank said, we were all instantly cured. In 1975, Frank became the first openly gay governmental appointee in the District of Columbia when he served on the Commission on Human Rights. In 1976, Frank was one of the founders of the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club. Shift forward to 1993, when Frank wrote the sodomy repeal law for the District of Columbia and saw our sodomy law repealed 30 years after he made that suggestion to the House Appropriations Commission. Of course, there's much, much more to what Frank has given to our community. He has been a visionary, an extraordinary worker, and an activist on the cutting edge for more than 40 years. He has made many people uncomfortable over the years because change makes people uncomfortable. Frank is one of the people who has created the community we live in today, where many of us can have families and children and work, political, and spiritual lives as openly gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgendered individuals. For all of that, Frank, we thank you and present you with NGLTF's Lifetime Achievement Award.
I'm speaking this rather than me. Thank you very much. I was asked to make a brief speech in connection with my acceptance of this award for a lifetime of achievement. I was then given my marching orders, 3 minutes in which to compress that 3/4 of a century of lifetime. Although I must say that Michelle did very well with it. Since that gives very little time for narrating or even alluding to specific achievements, I'll have to speak in generalities. Contrary to instructions, I will speak for a bit longer than 3 minutes, but not too much. Usually in my speeches, I tend to deal with issues in a depersonalized sort of way. This is a special occasion, and I'll speak first person and in a very personalized way. There's a term which some of those of you who are around in the 60s may remember. You no longer hear it very much. It was called radicalization. It's what happened to people when they may have been bland, ordinary, unassertive citizens who are suddenly visited with gross injustice imposed upon them, and it transformed them. And that's really what happened to me. My firing from the government, at that time, the civil service had a policy of exclusion of gays, which was quite as rigid and as ferociously enforced as the current policy of the military with respect to gays. And that left me with a burning sense of injustice. I've always tended to follow avenues to their end. So after the normal appeal, the civil service is part of the executive branch, I went on up and eventually wrote to the White House, predictably to no avail, and to the House and Senate Civil Service Committees. I got a nasty letter back from one of them. And finally took my case to the Supreme Court, after the lower courts, of course. I wrote my own brief for that, my own petition, which to my knowledge was the first gay rights brief ever filed. And it forced me to sit down and formulate my own philosophy. I must say, 38 years later, I've read it recently, it reads very well. Predictably, the court denied the petition, but I've been forced to face the issues. The gay movement of the day was bland, apologetic, defensive. That was not me. None of that suited my temperament. So I decided to found something here in Washington, and off we went. Those were exciting times. No one was doing anything. Activist and militant in our movement were dirty words, but not mine. We defined our own agenda and without competition went ahead and pursued it. Those were busy years leading into busy decades. It led to a profound change of personality for me. I used to be a shy, retiring person. If I ever came into a hall where a lecture was being given, I always looked for a seat as far back in the hall as I could find. Way back when I was in school, in high school and college, we used to have something called a 3-minute speech. For me, a 3-minute speech was was preceded by 3 weeks of nightmares. Now, 3 minutes is the first half of a good ad-lib opening sentence. And when I come into a lecture hall for something, I find a row front seat middle. And that was really a very real change. Well, I didn't formulate a guiding principle for my endeavors early on. In retrospect, I realized that I was consistently, if then tacitly, guided by certain precepts. There are those who might consider them arrogant, and perhaps you will, but so be it. Perhaps I am arrogant. The one thing in which I have absolute faith is in the validity of the products of my own intellectual processes. Therefore, if the world or society and I differ on anything, I'll give it a second look, and I'll give them a second chance to make their case. If we still differ, then I am right and they are wrong, and that is that. They can go right on being wrong as long as they don't get in my way. But if they do, there will be a fight, and I tend not to lose my wars. Accordingly, I have never chosen to adjust myself to society, but to the contrary, have worked with considerable success to adjust society to me. I am confident that society is much the better for the adjustments that I have administered. I'm no longer young. I feel much more at ease than I would ever have imagined years ago with the fact that while I'm still in good health, at age 74 there are not all that many years left to me. While I remain active and involved and will continue to be, as I move into the sunset, I take my departure feeling very comfortable with the secure knowledge that countless individuals and society as a whole are the better off for my having been here. Thank you for an award which I shall cherish and treasure.
Let's go right over here so that Judy can, let's just let Judy take our picture.
Thank you, Frank.